Okay guys, thank you very much for coming. I'm from James Cook University, far away from here in North Queensland. And I really want to tell you how the work skills development framework was introduced, how RSD influenced my thinking, and the potential of now the WSD for the future, in addition to what I have been doing with the workshop. So, that's the first thing, right? The objective of this, can you hear me now? The objective of this presentation is to show how WSD belongs to that MELT family, and of course the relevance of WSD to work integrated learning, because all the research I have done with the WSD is obviously connected with work integrated learning. Now, work integrated learning is a familiar term to some and maybe not so familiar. In America, they call it co-education. They call it internship. They're different words, but all it means is a placement or a student training himself to transition from the tertiary education into the real world of employability. So that's work integrated learning. So what I did was I adapted I'm sure you know the acronym RSD, Research Skills Development. I adapted the RSD to work skills. This all happened when John visited James Cook University and he challenged us. And I took up the challenge and there you go, we got the WSD. So I'm going to tell you how I adapted to the WSD and all the different ways we can use it. The methodology I use with WSD is basically reflective practice. That is the core. So at James Cook University, we get the students to have a reflective journal, and that's the base for them to write their reflective essay, to do their interviews based on work integrated learning, everything. Now, to tell you the truth, I'm in the Faculty of Science and Engineering, but we deal with marine biology, geology, environmental science, planning students. The science students have very little training in reflective practice. So what they do is they describe instead of reflect. So in order to overcome that, my strategy was I devised an interview format where I ask them questions about the 6 research skills and get them to think about what they have done rather than describe. So it is a kind of participation between student and educator, but that I found really worked because then they think. So that then led to me, for example, using the WSD to compare pre- and post-placement performance in a placement. Right? So that's one strategy. I also use the WSD to look at employer needs. I get employer feedback using the WSD, using the 6 work skills. And also training us as educators, perhaps in the future, to change will pedagogy. Now, whole idea of the WSD also was to bridge the cognitive and affective. There's research where I found the students mainly concentrated on the cognitive, like the technology side of it, the problem solving of it, but not the affective, which the employers wanted. How does this technology affect somebody? Or if you solve a problem, how does it, what does the other person think? It's all about the affective. So this is what I'm going to be telling you about, how it's going to cover. The relevance of WSD is it is very flexible. As you will see from the 2 papers that are following this session, they have used it innovatively to suit their work in this same session. It's cross-disciplinary, it's used with tertiary students, it can be used for career management, and it can be used for work skills training to complement new technology of the 21st century, which I'm going to touch very briefly within the 25 minutes, because I want to show you how flexible the framework is. So, How is MELT applied to work integrated learning? What does it mean in terms of work integrated learning? I define will as a nexus between content and knowledge developed through university and the application in the workplace. And the WSD educates students on scaffolding work skills. This is where the levels of autonomy come in, and adjusting to a workplace. Because it's not every student, you've got a WSD framework with you there when I'm referring to levels. It's not every student who can work autonomously, let's say independently, which would be level 3. And each of those work skills, they would be working at different levels. So we'll come to that now. Here's the marriage. How did RSD relate to WSD? Anybody who's working with RSD will find it very easy to switch to WSD. Now let's point it and then come here. Right, so that's your RSD, and you work with research skills. Now you can see that that's 6 research skills are applied here. The only one that's different is here, because I couldn't use communicate and apply for work skills. It was more collaborating with teamwork, which was more relevant to work skills. Perhaps with research skills, teamwork was there right across. But for me, with work skills, I just changed that. Then what I did was, I put verbs here to show you actually what it meant. So it was initiative and enterprise. Here it was to do with resource use, technology, etc. Right? This is in the paper. This isn't in the paper. This is just here as a PowerPoint. But this is a connection between the two. So they are identical, except one is work for research and the other one is for work skills. Now, here what I did was, for the PowerPoint, it's not in the paper because this is a visual presentation here. What I did was, I looked at the MELT skill facets. It's the same 6 that you saw, right? So that would be initiative, this would be use of resources, etc. And the MELT question is, I will say, for example, when you embark and clarify, a student walks into a placement and he or she should say, what is my goal? Why am I here? What am I doing? So you define, right? And that's the MELT question there. Or if I click on organize and manage, it would mean how do I plan and achieve or communicate? How do we interact with each other? These are just questions that I have thrown in that single question. Then the example of work skill for initiative is you clarify your role and you translate your ideas into action. Then what I did was I took a MELT action word. What do? You locate yourself in your placement. You focus, you inquire. With resource use, find and generate, you select, you innovate, you apply. Now, when you have these verbs associated, it is easy for the student to know what is it that I have to do to find out this particular work skill. So this is a way we need to guide the student. Just giving a framework is useless because they don't know what to do. That is a generic framework you have in front of you, and you can adapt it to your own discipline. So you can change the words within the cell and adapt it to your own. But the most important thing is you've got to guide the student. If it's reflective practice, you can use these MELT action words. How did you define? How did you define your role? How did you test? Or how did you reason out? So if you might have other verbs. I only put 3 there, but there could be others. 3 that I got. For communication, what did you listen to? How did you feel about it? Networking. Who did you network with? Where did that lead you to? So these are the questions you need to put to get them to reflect, right? That's how I would deal with it. Okay, I think I'll stand here. I find it easier to look at this. Right. So Teaching and learning work skills through reflective practice. As I said, that is a core section, and that's how I teach the WSD. What is reflective practice? When I asked them to record something, they just describe. I said, no, this is not a scientific experiment. You just don't describe. You got to write. You got to think laterally and see what effect did this have on so and so. Where would it lead to, and so on. You know, more about lateral thinking. So how do it's terrible. So how did they? Okay. So how did they engage in reflective practice? I told you it's a journal, right? Scaffolding is repeat use. They have a journal, they have an essay, they have an interview. So they know when they're working that they can identify themselves as receiving a lot of help, which will be level 1, working independently will be level 3, and so on, as given in that framework. And that's explained in the paper. Right. And this has to be supported by effective mentoring. You can't just ask them to do something, there has to be a mentor. Now the mentor could be, at the placement, we ask them to have somebody to relate to the student, like a supervisor of their work. So that mentor has to guide the student, and we tell them that these are the work skills that we are focusing on, and at the end, the employer gives us the feedback form as well, based on the WST. So we have guided questions to direct reflective thinking, and the issues with science and engineering students is, as I mentioned earlier, is they're not very good with reflective practice. So how did I use the WST? I used it to compare pre and post perceptions of work skills. So when they started the placement, what did they think? Which level did they think they were at in terms of problem solving? When they finished, which level did they think? How do they know that? I have 5 statements given in this interview, and they select one of them. Each of those 5 statements will relate to a level of autonomy. I've also used WSD in clinical reflective skills development framework, working with our lovely chairman, Kathy Selling and Sophie. And I've also used WSD to look at career development. This paper is in the RSD website, 5-stage career development cycle that we looked at, and also with a physiotherapist. So this is Allied Health. I looked at how you can use the WSD, not just for students, but for professionals to develop their career from becoming a novice to a professional. So it's really flexible what you can do with this framework. I'm sure you guys will have other ideas. I also use the WSD to help them to write resumes, to look at the work skills, to do interviews, for example. And what are your limitations? They get stuck. Then think of your work skills and think what your limitations are. So you can use it for resume writing, CVs, interviews, any of those things dealing with employability. Employer versus educator training, yes. So the major problem is the triad I'm talking about is the university, the student, and the industry, right, the employer. We actually lack that connectivity. Employers want something, university wants something. This morning we had discussions about graduate attributes and who determines graduate attributes. It's a university. So we have this problem of the lack of connectivity. Okay, now, yeah, I did a research study and it's published in ASN in 2014 where I asked, these are 2 of, there were more than this, I just selected 2. Is there a difference of opinion between employer students in how they perceive learning outcomes in the cognitive and affective domain? I found, as I mentioned in my introduction, students concentrated mainly on the cognitive and less on the affective. I've done a research study and tested it statistically, and you'll find it in that paper there. I also had another research question in the same paper. Do students display emotional work readiness? Answer will be in that paper to read. Actually, they don't. That's the answer. But you will find it statistically.
Spoiler alert.
Yes, unfortunately. So emotional work readiness is defined as understanding feelings, emotions of oneself and of others, and the management of those emotions. What I did was I used the concept of emotional intelligence, social intelligence and cultural intelligence and incorporated it into the WST. So there is another framework which is called cross-cultural competency. I wrote a paper where you can change the WSD and actually interpret it in terms of culture. Culture is not just ethnicity, it's religion, gender, workplace and everything, right? The broad word culture. Okay, my time must be coming up. Right. Yes, so finally, how do we, I spoke about tomorrow, the future. It means that we can use the same six, oh my God, this just moves very fast.
Yeah, backwards.
I think I got it. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Just leave. So same six work skills. What I found was the literature I read is pointing towards the fact that artificial intelligence is really important in the 21st century. So we need to adjust our syllabus, our frameworks to suit that. Particularly, I found out that artificial is replacing routine human jobs, like just entering names and stuff like that, not the thinking skills so much, because we want to aim at higher productivity. Here we go, an example is given there. And there's a lot to do with AI, which is artificial intelligence. And my next challenge is to write a framework with incorporating artificial intelligence for the workplace. That's my next challenge. So, yep, that's it.